And we're off. Okay. We are recording. Good. Cool. Okay. All right. So yeah, I think we'll start now. If any other people turn up, they can catch up. Welcome to Association Rules. Before we kick off, we'll just introduce who we are. I recognise some of you. I don't know if I have to all of you. So we'll just reintroduce who we are, just so you know who you're dealing with. Who are you?
Hi, I'm Ben. I think I've seen you guys before actually. So hi again. I just to recap, I've been doing web design, coding stuff for over 10 years, and I've been with Decoded teaching this sort of thing for over maybe nearly 4 years now. So teaching innovation skills, teaching coding, data science, speaking, all sorts of different things. And at the moment, I'm very heavily in this kind of data world as well. So I do this web stuff, making apps and games and things, kind of a lot of creative coding, but also looking heavily into data science and how we're using these algorithms and how those algorithms affect society and the ethics surrounding it as well. So that's kind of my outlook on the world, thing that I'm really passionate about.
Cool. So hello, I'm Alex. My background is I was an engineer and then I did cyber defense for the UK. And I did that for 3 years. And when you do that sort of thing, over 65 million people, that's really a data problem rather than anything else. So very heavily data orientated, using models like the ones we're going to be using today to try and get insight from data that really you could never do intuitively, or at least you could never do intuitively artistically. You need somehow to strip that data down to the real information, the patterns within it. And so that's sort of how you deal with that kind of thing. Since then, I've been, a bit like Ben, running these sessions for Decoded. And when I'm not here, I tend to help large organizations who perhaps can't move with the agility of small organizations, prototype and discover stuff about their data sets that maybe would take them years just because of internal politics or whatever. So before we begin what we're doing here, this is sort of where you are in your, I always get that, Academy Fellowship. What's the brand name here? Fellowship, yeah? Changes company to company.
Can anyone see the screen?
Yeah, that's a good idea. Let's have a bit of that.
Yeah.
I tried turning the lights off, but that didn't work. That's a better solution. So about here, which is pretty good fun. I can just say it gets more and more exciting, and we get more and more insights into the power of data as we go forward. In terms of that, I think you've just finished clustering. Was that the last month, roughly? So yeah, you're coming to. So this is all about association rules. How do people find clustering? All right, yeah. The idea is that you're not necessarily able to see the pattern, but data can sort of show those patterns to you in these sort of clustering algorithms. Is quite a powerful tool. This is really where intuition comes into data science. It's not someone just stares at a data set and they go, oh, I think that must be what this data shows. Like this clustering is that sort of exploration. Ben was talking about it earlier. Sort of almost the creativity is in this spot. Because you don't know what you're going to find, you just have to head off in a direction. And either you find something and you're like, wow, look what I found, or you find nothing at all. You just don't tell people about the times when you found nothing. Today we're doing association rules, which we'll discuss a bit further in a moment. And the next thing you'll be doing after this is visualization. It's the reason you've done it in this direction is because these sort of get us jumped in and running into the world of data. But actually this, for me, is one that you really need to put at the forefront of all your learning. Every single thing should start with a visualization. You don't need to understand all these algorithms if you don't understand visualization and you can't see the power in it. Everything starts with a visualization from maybe the direction you're going to head to, are your results even correct? How can we ever tell if our results are showing us real things? Or we can use visualization to back it up. But that's where you'll be going next. That's a really fun bit. Once you've done that, you really do have a toolbox now of unsupervised learning tools that you can go and apply to any problem. That I would say is an excellent section of things to do, and that's why that's your first sprint, and it will feed nicely into all your other ones. So we're in the workshop now. You will get a notebook to work on, some exercises after this, And then finally, you will be doing some business-related problem around the world of association rules. So,
Boom. Has anyone heard this before at all? Has any appreciation of what this might be doing? Yeah.
I'm going to go for it. I know it's the lethargy of the afternoon on a Monday.
You never know. Someone might have gone away and like read like a massive association rules book. You never know.
Don't worry, you weren't supposed to do that. There was no requirement to do that. In fact, the whole point of these modules is so you don't have to do that. But you may have done it. Anyone know what they are?
Yeah.
Go on then.
It's calculating relationships between things that have associations. For example, what products are often found in the same baskets.
Yeah.
Measuring the strength.
Yeah, so we could throw a few out there. If I say bread, you say butter. Yeah, if I say gin, you say... but the key here is you can get yourself caught up, a clustering can tell me, I am this kind of person, I watch these kind of movies, therefore if I watch these kind of movies and someone else like me watches these kind of movies, I'm likely to watch this other movie over here. That's not an association rule. It's not taking into account different moments in time. So I could go shopping today at Tesco, or I could go shopping tomorrow at Tesco, and my baskets could be different. So it's about those specific transactions, as it were. And how you define a transaction is sort of up to you. But it's also, it removes the concept, Ben mentioned it this morning, it removes the concept of price. So you don't necessarily know that this association is more valuable to you in terms of money than that one, but you do know that bread and butter are very strongly associated. You just you can't tell that gin and tonic probably has a bigger profit margin. Although I don't know if that's true. I made that up. And also you have no demographic involved. So you're not worrying about who bought that basket. That basket for 5 different people is the same. It's just as useful as each other. You're not comparing it back to the original shopper.
I've got a new anecdote on this actually.
Go on then.
So if you're in IKEA, right? Have you ever been to an IKEA? You wander around this maze and eventually you get to the big warehouse at the bottom. The big warehouse is just racks of stuff. And those racks of stuff are illogical in their layout. So you go around and you pick up bits for your cupboard you're making. And for some reason, half your cupboard is here and half the cupboard is like over there. And it turns out that they use algorithms like this to kind of ascertain that if you're buying this part of the product, you're probably buying this other product next to it. And actually they engineer their storage downstairs so that it's efficient for the types of things that people buy, not in alphabetical order, not in associated order with the actual thing itself. So you get things all over the place. The idea is that more likely you're in the right place for the things that you're buying. If you're buying that thing, probably buying the thing next to it as well.
So it becomes very subjective very quickly of how you use something like association rules. An example of that would be if you're pretty sure that if someone buys bread, they're going to buy butter, then the question becomes, do we put bread and butter next to each other or do we put them at opposite ends of the store? Because the first one makes your user's life good. Your second one means that they have to pass through every other product that they may need or may have not thought of, but you'll just be able to get the upsell as they go. So how you use them, that's your domain knowledge. Can't help you there. But we can show you how to get there and how you can make decisions based on these things. So what we're going to do, we're going to talk about association rules. They're everywhere. Then we're going to do it by hand. And then we're going to do it with code. Main reason being, whenever you can do an algorithm by hand, you should give it a go. You should walk through it by step, how you would do it, because that's how you truly understand. The beauty of the libraries and the code that we use around association rules is actually the code is really, really short. So when you run it, if you just looked at the code, you'd be like, okay, I've written some code, but I don't really know what's going on. They do have the benefit, though, that we can actually do some of it by hand and sort of understand exactly why these decisions are being made. And that's quite powerful. And then questions and a wrap-up, etc., etc. So, yeah, it's this classic situation, the shopping basket example. If someone is going to buy bananas, apparently in this picture they also buy carrots, bread, milk, and vitamins, drugs. I don't know. Something.
Could be anything.
But actually, just if I can come out of this, some interesting case studies of people using association rules. So this one, actually, what I'll do is that. Basically, Walmart discovered that people who were buying beer seemed to also be buying diapers a lot. And they wanted to do some analysis on this. Their association rules were saying these two are highly correlated. If you buy one, you're likely to buy the other in the same basket. So they went and they thought this is weird. So they went and did the research, and it actually turned out that this was happening after 6 p.m. on Thursdays and Fridays. And so when they started interviewing the people who were buying beers and diapers, they would interview them and say, and generally they would say their other half called them on the way home from work, and whichever one it was, could say, can you pick up diapers or can you pick up beer? And so when they were going in to do the family shop, they were also always buying those two. So they discovered this very, very tightly correlated pair of items. Question is then, do you put beer and diapers across the store or next to each other on a Thursday night? So as it becomes subjective, it becomes about marketing and sales and everything else very, very quickly. Data scientists shouldn't be making those decisions. I hope that's kind of obvious. Data scientists like numbers, not store layouts and stuff.
I like the idea of having like the entrance to the store. You just get your diapers and your beer quickly, pay for it.
There's a till just there,
yeah,
ready.
Exactly.
So there's an article about it. If this kind of thing interests you, think about how people are using these kind of things. Of course, covered in advertising. There's another story where it doesn't go quite to plan.
Has anyone seen this? This is a bit old now, but the idea that a teen was given some tokens some vouchers through the post to say that you might be buying vitamins for your pregnancy, and their father was outraged to get these things. Oh, you're encouraging my teenage daughter to have sex and all sorts of stuff, and it then transpired that the algorithm just inferred that they might need these things based on their shopping habits, and actually the daughter was actually pregnant, and a couple of months later she was tested positive. So
Yeah, again, you can see how this jumps quite quickly out of data science and into a world of marketing, advertising, and most importantly, probably ethics. But the scientist who did this bit of research, he wasn't just able to tell you that you were or were not pregnant, he was able to tell you what stage you were in of your pregnancy, and then could retarget you with advertising based on that, purely based on things you were just putting in a shopping basket. It's kind of we're not saying, now go away and do this, we're saying be aware that this is the sort of spectrum of things that you can do with this kind of thing. I think I'm supposed to move on a tab, aren't I? Yeah. So the idea being that we can find hidden patterns within data. That's what this is really about. A little bit like clustering. Where do things sit next to each other in a sort of shopping space, I suppose. However, it doesn't just stop at marketing and sales promotion. Actually, it's anything where an individual or a transaction, and when I say transaction, it's something you can define, it's basically up to you where you can have multiple things within that transaction. So the shopping one's obvious. What do you have in your shopping basket? The drug reactions is, if you take a certain test drug, basically, do you get a rash? Do you get a runny nose? Whatever it is. And by having multiple of these symptoms, they can start to work out what's going to come next, for instance, or what could come next. Inventory management sort of kind of ties in nicely with marketing and sales promotions. If you know that people will buy this product and this one, then if, I don't know, let's say it's umbrellas and something else, if you know that the weather's going to be terrible for 3 months, therefore umbrella sales are going to go up, you might also increase the number of some other product in your inventory because you know they sell together. It's that kind of thing. Finally, this is quite an interesting one. Where is it? Yeah, here. So an article about basically when people go to their stockbroker or call their stockbroker and they say, I want to invest in tech, or they say, I want to buy Apple shares, can you work out what else they're likely to tell their their broker? So they might, if you know that someone, when they buy Apple shares, are probably going to want to buy Logitech and TFL shares at the same time, then you can start, if Apple shares start to be sold quicker, you can maybe invest in the other ones because you'll realize that the broker will be looking at those ones shortly too. So there's a range of uses, but the shopping basket one is sort of the least abstract, the easiest one to get your head around. But I would start trying to just think about what kind of other uses this kind of thing can be for.
Yep. So I think we've looked at this before. So we've got 3 main types of machine learning prediction models. We've got supervised learning, unsupervised and reinforcement learning. And much like clustering, we're kind of in this exploratory middle ground moment, unsupervised. So we've got a load of data, and we want to have a look at the data and see what the data is telling us about what's going on. So again, like Alex was saying, we need some sort of domain knowledge there. You can't just look at it and go, cool stuff. We have to kind of interpret what those clusters are, or maybe go and research what those clusters are. But what we can do is make really good investigation and then be able to make decisions based on that exploration. So moving things around in our inventory, ordering more things, moving stuff around the shop, knowing that some reaction to something probably means that you're going to have a reaction to something else. All these sorts of things can be really powerful.
Yeah, so I won't talk about reinforcement learning too much because there's another module where that's covered in more depth. But as this is unsupervised, supervised is your situation where you do know the outcomes. So it's spam or not spam. If you give a machine 1 million spam emails and 1 million not spam emails and tell it these are spam, these are not, spot what the difference is, that would be unsupervised. As Ben said, in this case, we don't have an outcome. We're just like, show me patterns within this data. And if you patterns, when we talk about patterns, we're talking about basically being close in a cluster.
Yeah. You could also cluster the spam
Yes.
thing as well. You could take your spam and say, I don't know if any of these are spam. Give me some clusters, and then look at the clusters for spam, and you could do that as well.
Yeah. See what similarities there were.
Yeah, it's like a different way of.
So, just to give our sort of exercise now, topic or brief, and we want to stay away from the shopping basket one because that's the really obvious one. Imagine we have a sort of Airbnb style thing called Fellows B&B, and basically you go along and you choose all your destinations for the year, and you put them in your basket and you pay for them all at once. You get a 10% discount if you do it that way, rather than waiting. So what we're interested in is if you put certain things in your basket, what other things are you likely to put in your basket? And we're going to be sort of using you lot as our data source for the day. But this could be, this is a recommendation algorithm perhaps around where you might recommend to people to go on holiday based on other things that other places you've already been. So this is the classic sort of pipeline of data. We need to find some data, have a look at that data, transform it into a state that's useful to do analysis on, create a model. This is also where you do your visualization, by the way. Create a model, in this case, our association rules, describe our data, and finally evaluate, decide how it affects our domain. And when I say domain, I mean the sort of, where does it fit in real life? Does it make sense? What tools can we use to see whether or not it makes sense? A bit like the beers and diaper thing, they went and literally asked people in the store, why are you buying these 2 items? So, to source the data.
Great. So you should have sheets in front of you, and they will have lots of different cities on them. So what we're going to do first of all is the first column. I'd like you to make a tick or a 1 or whatever X mark next to between 2 and 10 different cities. Not all of the cities that you'd recommend, but just have a tick of the ones that you'd maybe recommend, or just arbitrarily tick them. Doesn't really matter.
Obviously, it's fictional, so if you have or haven't been there, it doesn't really make a difference. But
so these are your
create us some data.
Recommendation transactions that we're making here. And then after we've done that, we're going to go around the whole room, and we're going to collate everyone's transactions, everyone's recommendations, and we're going to use that as our data.
Well, they'll be the last ones. Okay. I'll read them out for them as well.
Okay, so look, sit back and look relaxed once you've finished.
Yeah. Shouldn't take too long. Don't get too stressed over this. We're not going to check what you thought of Dubovnik or whatever.
But we might.
Someone is on our sheet. Wrong laptop. That's what's going on there. There we go.
Okay, so could we start from over here? Could you sort of like reasonably slowly read out your recommendations, please? Oh, sorry. Before we start, if you could, everyone, take a new column and note these down as you go. Okay, great. Go.
Barcelona, Budapest, Copenhagen, Lisbon,
Nice. That sort of speed was excellent.
It's got bingo.
Yeah. so but just to be clear here, we are sourcing our data that we're then going to find. If someone recommends Amsterdam, do they recommend Lisbon? Or if someone is about to book Amsterdam, are they going to book Lisbon as well? That's the kind of thing we're looking for here. That's an association rule. Just so keeping context. Okay, next.
Berlin, Edinburgh, Florence, Paris, Rome, Vienna.
Excellent.
Berlin, Budapest, Dublin, Edinburgh, London, Paris, Prague,
Cool. Should we go here?
Amsterdam, Barcelona, Budapest, Dubrovnik, Edinburgh, Lisbon, London, Rome, Seville, and Venice.
Perfect.
Barcelona, Berlin, Florence, London, Paris, Rome, and Venice.
Excellent. Next.
Amsterdam,
Yeah.
Berlin, Budapest,
Yeah.
Copenhagen,
Yeah.
Dublin, Lisbon, Rome, Venice.
Barcelona, Berlin, Edinburgh, Lisbon, London, and Prague.
Barcelona, Berlin, Edinburgh, Lisbon.
Where do we get to? Should we go to you then?
Yeah, so Amsterdam, Dubrovnik, London, Milan, Venice.
Should we go to you at the back there? Yeah.
And the last table.
Barcelona, Florence, Lisbon, London, Milan, Seville, Vienna.
Amsterdam, Budapest, Copenhagen, Dublin, Madrid.
Amsterdam, Berlin, Copenhagen, Dubrovnik, Edinburgh, Florence, London, Prague, Stockholm, Vienna.
There's no wrong answers here. It's fine.
Okay, and
How
then
many-
we have Ben and me and the people who work at the front desk there
Yeah.
to pad out our numbers. Okay, so let's go, Ben.
Amsterdam, Dublin, Edinburgh, Lisbon, Milan, Reykjavik, St. Petersburg, Vienna.
So is there anything, part of the, although the exercise feels a bit sort of contrived in terms of where the data's coming from, when you were doing that, did any countries or anything, any associations start to jump out at you at all? Was there anything in particular that you thought, these two seem to pop up a lot or anything like that? Pretty hard for the human mind to do it. But you can sort of, when you do it, you can sort of feel that, for instance, Reykjavik, Stockholm didn't appear very much. But does that tell us anything at all? For instance, if they appeared always together, that might be a strong association, even though they didn't appear much. On the other hand, something could appear a lot with something else. And you go, well, those two things seem to be very tightly associated. But actually, they could be also just popular items in themselves. So can we separate these ideas out? So let's take the example again. Bread and butter, probably extremely popular items to be bought. So you've got two problems. You've got a problem. Are they bought because they're bought together because they're associated, or are they bought independently? They just both happen to be popular. For instance, I imagine if you should see the association rules for, say, Tesco, I imagine chewing gum appears in a lot of shopping baskets. And so you would find that chewing gum and wine may seem to have an association, because every time someone buys wine, there's chewing gum in the basket. But do they have an association, or just chewing gum's so popular it just happens to be in that many baskets? And that's what association rules allows us to do, is actually start to differentiate the difference between an association rule and just independently a popular item. Does that make sense? So at this stage, it's quite hard to do that. We can't, even though you've just sat there and you've seen all the data, to create these association rules for human is hard. But actually, it's very, very straightforward when we start to put some maths into play. So, what else have I got in the way of slides, by the way? I always feel...
We want to make some...
Yeah, you see, I'm always one behind the slides.
Yeah.
Collect destinations from other fellows. Okay. Explore and transform. Turn your data into a sparse matrix. Okay, so what this is basically is a lot of zeros and a few ones. And if you think about what this is doing for, if you think about what this is doing for us, actually this is every possible location in the world that this fellow's B&B thing goes to. You need to have all the possible options along one side and all the people who are buying shopping baskets worth along the other. That will generally result in very, very what we call sparse matrices. And that's when you have lots of zeros, lots of empty spaces. And that, if you think about Tesco, imagine their equivalent for this. They might have 10,000 products available in store, but people probably buy less than 1% worth of those products. So when they make this kind of thing, there's going to be a few ones and loads of zeros. And this sparse matrix idea is actually really, really efficient for a computer to do calculations on. So at this stage of sort of your journey through data, it's worth knowing that these things exist. By the way, a dense matrix, which is lots of ones and less zeros, it's harder to process, but it's worth you knowing that this is what this is called. The second thing about this is it's actually kind of a bit weird. This isn't the philosophy of data. It's sort of like scrambles my mind a bit. So this is how we tend to like data. And all I've done is transpose this. So sheet 1 was countries, and then you guys across there. Now I have you guys across there and countries across there. And the reason for this is the general principle in data is one observation per row. And I can actually show you a reference on that.
I think it kind of makes sense because the columns are a finite thing, whereas the transactions, you could keep getting more transactions, more and more data, which have the same columns. So it's just it's going to go down forever.
Yeah, you do sort of. I don't know if it seems to make sense to you guys. To me, if these are observations, which is just you guys giving us data, you can just keep adding rows. You know, even on a piece of paper, you don't go wider, do you? You go longer. So from that perspective, it seems intuitive. But there's also this nice write-up, which you might want to have a read of. Just Googling tidy data in Python. He gives quite a nice example. Imagine this is someone testing some new drugs or something. You've got 3 people, John, Jane, and Mary. Treatment A, inconclusive for John. Treatment B, scored a 2. Yeah, same ideas here, here, and here. But actually, now we've got the problem that John Smith, you know, if you would try treatment C, D, E, F, G, H, this thing is going to get much longer for John, but it doesn't need to get longer for Jane and Mary. So we're going to have empty spaces for everyone else except John. So if we spin this into a way of each row is an observation, just one observation, then we get a John Smith talking about treatment A, it was inconclusive, and a John Smith for treatment B, he scored a 2. There's one observation per row, and this is like how you should start thinking about organizing data. When you have data in a way that's one observation per row, you're ready to start doing analytics on it. So for that to be possible, we needed to transpose our matrix. Now our observations, you guys, is down, and then some of you could do another one, you see, and we would just add it on, but it wouldn't require all of you to do that. And then the things that you can choose along the top. So that's our first flip.
So at this point, we've got some data. What is the first thing that we might want to do with some data after we've collected it? After we've turned it into something that we can start working with? What might we want to do with it? Yes, exactly. We're going to look at it. We're going to visualize it some way. We're going to eyeball it, and the best way of doing that is to create charts, visualize some aspect of the data.
I just lost a column on my thing. Oh, is it on this? Oh, it's on this one, yeah. That's why, sorry. Yeah, here it is. So, you know what?
Yeah. So we can total up our columns, so we can like tally. And you can see here, can't see, but here we got the totals per destination. So not the total transactions, the total in the destination, and we can create a bar chart saying, the most popular destination out of our data was happened to be Berlin, for example. We can start eyeballing the data and seeing what that is telling us about what we've collected.
See, average is probably somewhere around 4, roughly, in there. Quite a big spread.
Yeah. No one did much with Marseille, Stockholm, Valencia, but quite a nice spread across everything else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then these ones become interesting because if we just by looking at this immediately, the relationship between that and that is so different that if we get strong rules that start to appear around Marseille, perhaps Barcelona and Marseille seem to be tightly correlated, or we might actually be running into that chewing gum scenario. Barcelona is just so popular, it's going to appear in every basket anyway. So we can start, so it's quite useful from that perspective. There's other graphs we can plot. What about
It's not as fun when you're waiting for the screen to refresh.
oh, is it slow? There we go. What's this one? So we're suddenly.
This is sort of like a heat map of the different destinations. So we can plot a more vibrant colour for where the most total areas are. So you can see that.
I think red is
Norway. Is that Stockholm? That one.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be. It doesn't
It's
have.
not
Yeah, it's
popular.
done it for the whole of Sweden.
Amsterdam's pretty popular. Italy, Portugal, these sorts of places become more popular in our data.
So these kind of things can start to kick off our sort of domain knowledge and what a graph is telling us. Let's go back to this presentation. So yeah, see, we've done that. I'm always behind on the presentation. And then finally, the modeling. This is where we're going to be doing it by hand. So you guys are going to be doing this as well. And so the way the association rules work is basically, if you remember at school, and you in maths class, and they said I've got a bag of tennis balls, 6 of them are red, and 12 of them are blue, and 15 of them are yellow. What's the probability I get a yellow one? And it's really boring. That is just the most boring model ever. I wish they taught us association rules at school instead of that, because that's what this is all about. This is a better example. So what the first thing we do is we basically want to know for each of our baskets, what's the probability that each of these countries is going to appear in that basket. And we call this support. So how basically before we can start to go, well, this thing and this thing seem to be brought a lot together. Actually, how often do each of these things appear? Is it likely that Copenhagen is in a basket on its own anyway? If it's not, it's going to be very hard to find an association rule for that. So the first thing we do is we calculate our support. And if you open your sheets,
To second page.
we're going, yeah.
Yeah, you'll see that there's a column of all the destinations, and then we want to create a frequency. So this is actually our tally, which we have here at the end. So we can read those out now. And then support is that tally divided by the total number. So we've actually got 18 transactions, I think. That's right. So on the top right, there should be a total number of transactions, and that should be 18. So the support will be that frequency divided by the total number of transactions, which again is, like Alex said, is just kind of the probability that we'll see that item appear in any transaction.
Yeah, so all we're doing is the number of transactions was you guys plus the 5 we added, so it's 18 in total. So all you need to do is write down the frequency in the frequency box for each of those ones, and I can help us speed that along here because I've got them calculated for you. So basically, if you add these up by yourself, you may end up with different numbers. It doesn't matter too much, it's just for the exercise. But I can tell you that the frequency goes in order, and that'll be from Amsterdam down to Vienna. 9, 8, 10, 5, 7, 6, 5, 8, 6, 9, 8, 5, 1, 6, 5, 5, 3, 6, 4, 4, 1, 1, 7, 5.
You got more monotonous as you went on there.
I was wondering when it was going to end. So now all we need to do is calculate the support. So that's going to be the number I just read out to you divided by the total for each of those. I realise that's not the nicest sum in the world, so we can do the same thing. So that's, I'm going to do it as percentages because this is an easier way to think about it. So 50%, 44, 55, 28, 39, 33, 28, 44, 33, 50, 44, 28, 55, 33, 28, 28, 17, 33, 22, 22, 5.5, which means I made a mistake, by the way. We'll come back to that. 5.5, 39, 28. 1, 2, 3, 4. Where was that one I went wrong? M&S.A.007 was 5.5 rather than 55. So we have, if you've seen Apollo 11, all the scientists have to get the sums the same. Okay, so before we move on then, let's talk about what this means. Because really, what's going to happen is we're going to do this by hand, and the reason we're doing it by hand is because we can really get into like how this algorithm works. When we do the code, you can barely see what's going on at all. It's just very, very quick and easy. So when it comes to, we're going to be doing more of this division stuff, and really this is a ratio. We need to be thinking about what does this actually mean, because this is, it's going to get more and more and more of that. If you increase the total number of baskets or transactions, then our support is going to go down, which means that this item appears less in baskets, which immediately gives us some idea of popularity of this item. However, actually, what if this is a very expensive item? We don't expect it maybe to appear in as many baskets, but perhaps a microwave is always bought with a toaster. We don't expect them to appear very often, but they could always be bought together. That might help us decide what we're going to advertise around the toasters or the microwave section in Tesco Ultra. If you increase the number on the bottom, the support goes down, and obviously, if you increase the number on the top, the number goes up. It sounds kind of straightforward what we're doing there, but actually that's what I would try and get your head into when you're thinking about this. How does a ratio work, and how does changing one thing on the top or the bottom affect the overall result? What does the overall result actually mean in the real world? So that's support, and it's our first metric. It's the first thing we can use to sort of get an idea of this kind of rules. Let me just make sure I'm not going to miss out on a... Yeah, okay, we'll just carry on as we were. I don't keep these slides going. Okay, so that's fine, but what we might need to do now is basically we need to basically define a threshold. We're doing this by hand, so we're going to say, look, if something appears less than 30% of the time, so less than roughly a third of the time, or a number we can pick, we probably want to have a look at those supports to see what that number might be. But if let's say it's a bit below 25% support, it appears less than a quarter of the baskets, we'll just write it off, and now we'll consider it not useful. Now the reason we're doing that now is because we've got to do this by hand, so setting a support means we don't have to do hours of work. Obviously with a computer, we can set that support very low and see what it all means. But for now, we're just going to set a threshold. So let's say that let me just have a look through the numbers. What do we think? What do we think is a sort of place where you'd cut this off? Is there anything you can probably see the numbers easier than I can. What do you reckon? Did someone say a number?
Quite a lot of 28.
Okay, cool. That's good. Okay, so I tried to just very, very roughly plot a really terrible graph. That's 27 there. So, and you're saying 33 somewhere here, isn't it? Must be about, is that 33? Yeah. So that's 33. So in reality, I might think that this numbers around here are actually reasonably interesting. Seems to be like quite a strong split. But actually, I don't want to do that many calculations by hand. So we'll push it above that 33 just to get the point rather than sit here for hours doing the sums. So let's say we set a threshold of 34. So we're interested in anything that has a support of higher than 34. So immediately that support means that we can trim down our potential rules. So could people please tell me the locations that have a support greater than or equal to 34? Thank you. Yeah. Wow, there's a lot. It's all above 34? Okay, we're going to change this. What can we go higher to chop this down for? So the reason we're going to change this is because the minute we have to find all the combinations of all of these. So is there a number that look 40? Okay, let's go with 40 and see what we chop down to. 45? What will that give us? Yeah. London, no? So it's just 3 of them. That's good. Okay. Okay, what were the supports for Amsterdam? 50. 0.5. Lisbon? 50 and Berlin? Cool. Okay.
Not much in it.
Not much in it.
What's this telling us at the moment? These 3 items. They're popular. Yeah, they're the most popular items. They're the ones that we pruned off all the rest. They're very similarly popular. So it might be interesting, kind of, are they overlapping in some way, like this? Are they always together, or are they totally separate? Are they, that's kind of what question we're asking here.
And the fact that there's 3 of them and they all appear 50% or more of the baskets, we do feel that there should be some strong overlap there, right? You can't have 3 times 50%, doesn't work. It would be nice if they were a bit different. I'm sort of half hesitant to just change one of these to make it more interesting, but perhaps we will.
We'll move forward. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. If we need to, we might come back on this one. Hopefully, if I get my cells right, we'll be able to do that. But what we want then is to go. Okay, well now we've got some places that actually seem to have quite high popularity. What sort of combinations are there? Well, we've got Amsterdam. No. Amsterdam to Lisbon. Now, here's a question. This is why I kind of want to change the numbers. But here's a question. If I buy bread and I'm likely to buy butter, does that mean if I buy butter, I'm likely to buy bread? Not necessarily, exactly. So here's an example. If I buy gin, you expect me to have lemons probably in my basket. If I buy lemons, do you expect me to have gin in my basket? No, they're quite different rules. So we have to consider both situations. In this one, if I've got Amsterdam, am I likely to have Lisbon? It's not necessarily the same as if I have Lisbon, am I likely to have Amsterdam? So we need to consider it in both directions. Okay, so that means Amsterdam, Lisbon, Lisbon, Amsterdam.
Berlin.
Yeah, Berlin, Amsterdam, Amsterdam, Berlin. And so if you turn to your next sheet, by the way, you'll get the double ones, which is what we're doing now. And this becomes more interesting. This is when we start to get our rules. So you can put, I'm just putting the letters, it makes my life a bit easier. Well, what else have we got? So we've got Amsterdam, Lisbon, Lisbon, Amsterdam, Berlin, Amsterdam, Amsterdam, Berlin, Lisbon, Berlin,
Yeah.
Berlin, Lisbon.
Yeah.
And that's it.
That's it. So if we have the remainder of 3 items, you have that many combinations in a 2 set, which is just 6 items, basically different combination sets. If we had many more combinations, we could produce our double items, but then you can see that on the sheets we also have a triple item set. So if we got another step forward and decided that we wanted to know something like if Amsterdam, if Lisbon and Barcelona, something like that, we could also make a rule which had 3 of these in it. And then again 4, 5, 6, and we could keep going. For us at the moment, we're just going to stick to our 2 item sets.
So this is saying, if we've got Amsterdam, what's the chance that they'll put Lisbon in their basket? You can go further. If they've got Amsterdam and Lisbon, what's the chance of them having Berlin in their basket or something like that? And you see the rules get tighter and much more niche, so they can start to show you quite interesting things. I think we should change this number.
You think?
Yeah.
Goddamn data.
It's not going to. I know what's going to happen next, and it's going to be like, well, that doesn't seem to show anything.
Yeah, you guys just like Amsterdam too much. That's the problem.
Okay, is everyone happy if we just, for the sake of it, change Amsterdam to 45%? Just because if we're not going to see the point of the next step if they're all so close. So, can we all artificially just make, for the sake of this, 45%? I think that's, yeah, we'll learn more if we do that. Please trust me on that. So what we need to do now is we calculated our support based on the individual ones before, which is how we just pulled out the ones that we wanted to concentrate on. But now we've got a double situation, where we want to say, based on this, what's the chances of this? And then we'll show you what we're going to do next. Yeah. So this is saying, given this, what's the chances of this? So it's the support of that and that over the total. So instead of just going, how many times does Amsterdam appear and divide by the number of transactions, it's how many times does Amsterdam appear and Lisbon appear over the number of transactions.
Yeah, together in a transaction. See, this is going to be the same or less than each of these individual supports. Because you can't have, I can't describe it.
Yeah, so like
that's how it works out. Exactly.
Yeah,
so this is we've already worked these 2 out, and they can't be more than this because it'd have to be the same or less.
So when you look at the so here's our supports, right? So we've got basically if Amsterdam appears 45% of the time, then Amsterdam and Lisbon can't appear together more than 45% of the time. Does that make sense? If Amsterdam's can't have they can't appear more than Amsterdam appears on its own.
Unless you artificially change the number.
And that, yes, like I just did. So
then who knows?
So what we can do then is we can go, well, what's the changing that number might of course.
I know. I feel like you.
Screw it.
I think
Back.
you might have to take away.
Yeah, gonna have to actually change the data. Never
Yeah.
mind, we'll stay where we were. So what we need to do then is, could you count up for me the number of times that Amsterdam and Lisbon both appear in a transaction? And I'll try and do it as well. So Amsterdam, Lisbon. 1? 3 times. Cool. Okay. So it appears 3 times. They both appear 3 times.
The total is 18.
Yep, the total is 18. And so that's that's slightly.
Oh, okay. So it's the frequency again.
Yeah, you can just change that to F. Yeah. Otherwise, the calculation's already been done. Yeah, that's better. So okay, so Amsterdam and Lisbon it's 16, which means that Lisbon Amsterdam is also 16. That's kind of important. That was 3 divided by 18. So what about Barcelona and Amsterdam? 3? See, this is what I mean by the numbers are going to be all the same, but never mind for now. And Lisbon, Barcelona. Sorry? That's what I mean. 4. Okay, so we did the same thing again, except now we've paired them up. And now what's the support telling us? 5. People get 5 or still 4? 5? Let's go with 5 just to make it a bit more interesting. Cool. So is this now teaching us anything new about support? So hopefully this support up here was quite logical. How many times does it appear out of all the transactions? Give us an understanding of popularity of a place. That could be the same for any basket, any transaction. So that's like quite a nice metric, really. It just appears quite a lot. We immediately know Berlin is quite a popular destination. The moment we group them into pairs like this, what does support teach us? Wild guesses? No? Remember lemon gin or gin and lemon? No? It's not considering the concept of the order being important. It doesn't, at this stage, it does not consider Amsterdam and Lisbon different from Lisbon and Amsterdam. Whereas logically, this is why domain knowledge is so important. Logically, we know that buying gin probably means lemons, but buying lemons probably does not mean gin. So we need to start accounting for this kind of thing as well. So we now have our new metric. It's based on our support, but it's called our confidence. It's called our confidence that these two things indeed do have some stronger correlation between each other. Do you want to throw the confidence equation on the board?
Yep. I'm confident in it. Okay, so the confidence.
So support has just told us the popularity of these two things appearing together. We know this number can't be higher than these numbers. It's just, what's the popularity of these two things appearing together? It does not tell us that there is an association between these two things. It just means they're likely to appear together. Our confidence will give us this idea that if we do see Amsterdam, we are going to see Lisbon. It's slightly different. It's that chewing gum example at the cash desk. Just because it appears in every basket doesn't mean it will be bought with something else. And suddenly we'll get the Amsterdam-Lisbon is different from Lisbon-Amsterdam. We can talk through the equation in a second.
So the badly spelled so x therefore y equals the support of x and y, which we did just now, which you can see there. So we take our 0.16, slap it in there as the Amsterdam-Lisbon, and what we want to know is if this, therefore that, so the support of x, and this would give us confident that these things are related or not.
Yeah. So the x there is already in our basket. Whatever is x, and let's just take Amsterdam as an example. If Amsterdam is already in our basket, then the confidence that we will pick up y, or whatever that's going to be in this case Lisbon, the confidence we will also choose Lisbon, based on the fact that we've already got Amsterdam in our basket, is based on the support of both those things, which we've already got, but now we're relating it back to the actual thing that we've already got in our basket, which is Amsterdam. Yeah, Amsterdam. So now we're saying, right, well, this is the probability that both of these are in our basket, but our confidence is actually going to be that divided by the support of Amsterdam, which is 0.5. Yeah. Any guesses of any quick mental calculations of what that's going to leave us? What's our confidence then? Number divided by a half? Yeah. So we can do the support of Amsterdam. So by the way, you get this antecedent. You'll hear this word, I'm sorry about it, I didn't make it up. Antecedent is the thing that has already occurred. Amsterdam is in our basket. So therefore, this becomes the consequent, the thing that is going to happen as a result of that being in our basket. So the port of our antecedent.
And then the other side is the consequent.
Yeah, exactly. I've got it written down further down. Yeah. So now we have a confidence, as someone pointed out, of about 33%. So actually, right, what does that mean then? Okay, so if I increase the number on the bottom, the size of my confidence goes down, i.e. the number of baskets that Amsterdam appears in way outweighs the number of baskets that Amsterdam and Lisbon both appear in. So actually overall, this pairing, Amsterdam-Lisbon, is quite small compared to the number that Amsterdam appears in. Does that make sense?
And this is why we separate these two things out, because once we do this on the second rule, where we see how frequent Lisbon is compared to Amsterdam, we get hopefully a different number.
Well, this is why I wanted to fiddle
It
with
probably
it.
won't be in that. Okay. So
Yeah.
ideally, you will see a different number here, because you'll find that Lisbon might occur without Amsterdam more or less, depending on what the frequency is.
So let's just. Hang on. Right, so you can see they're the same. Imagine that Amsterdam 0.45 that I tried to change it to before I realised that was going to break everything. If I make that less popular, so now you can see that actually, because there's less Amsterdams, that means this number has gone down, which means this has got bigger.
Yeah.
And the confidence of Amsterdam and Lisbon appearing has gone up. So the chance of those two happening together we've just become more confident in it.
Can anyone tell me what the maximum number for confidence might be? 1, yeah. So if you have 1, you're basically like 100%. You know, these things always occur together.
So in terms of that, it means that this number, what relationship does this number then have to this one?
They're the same. Yeah, exactly.
It would say that every time Amsterdam appears, Lisbon appears, and therefore it must be 100% confident. They always appear together. That would be the highest confidence we could have. Okay, for the sake of it, I'm just going to leave that as 0.45 just to see how these ones appear, but then as we move on, I'll change it back, just so we can keep discussing stuff. Okay, so let's do it this one. So this is, the antecedent is Berlin. So we want that, and we're set that. Okay, so Berlin's more popular, so the confidence has gone down because the number on the bottom has got bigger. Let's do it again then. This one's Amsterdam. This one's Lisbon. And this one's Berlin. Okay, so now we've got some confidence that's come up to 55%. So that sounds pretty good. What does that mean in terms of the equation? That means for the number to have got bigger, the bottom must have been smaller. So, okay. So the support of Berlin compared to, the support of Lisbon compared to the Lisbon and Berlin appearing is reasonably small. I.e. Berlin and Lisbon seem to appear quite a lot compared to how many times Lisbon appears on its own. So that's what I know I'm doing this really slowly, but I'm just trying to go through the equation in sort of English to see how the numbers change. Okay, so we've got one more metric then called lift. The problem here is if the items here are both popular, we can get quite confident. We can get high confidences. But actually, as we said, take the chewing gum example. You've got two really popular items, and let's go with, I don't know, bottles of water and chewing gum. I imagine those probably sell generally quite a lot. So you might end up with lots of baskets with them both in, that they both, compared to the number that then both not in. So you could end up with really high confidence scores, and actually they're still independent properties, just really, really popular. And confidence wouldn't allow this situation. Thousands of baskets with bottles of water and thousands of baskets with chewing gum might mean we get a 98, 99% confidence, but actually I don't consider those two things associated in any way whatsoever as a buyer. So this is the kind of thing we need to take account for. And we call this lift. And what it does is it's the same as confidence, except it brings in the second factor on the bottom, the other thing, i.e. in this case, Lisbon compared to Amsterdam.
I think this one makes more sense to me, because everyone's everyone's at the party, effectively. You've got our support of both of them, so kind of like our frequency of both of them happening within a transaction over the total transactions. So that's what the top bit is. And then we've got the frequency of one happening on its own over the total transactions times the frequency of the other one happening on its own over the total frequency. So you've got these independent agents and then both together, and this sums to between 1 and infinity, we discovered earlier. But you're looking probably between 0 and 2-ish.
Yeah. So interestingly, I've heard this being called superstition, because this is that sort of situation. This and this seem to always occur together. It doesn't actually tell you that they have something, they have some connection to each other. They just always, you can be sure there is a rule, chewing gum and water appear a lot. But you don't necessarily have anything to give you a marketing angle, because there's no association between those two things. Does that make sense, the difference there? This next one is all about, actually, are they associated with each other? Is there association here?
Yeah.
And that's because this number, if you multiply these two percentages together down here, this number on the bottom gets smaller as they get bigger, as they get smaller.
Yeah, because these are fractions again. So 0.5, 0.5.
0.25,
Exactly. So
which means the number gets 4 times bigger.
Over this number here. And interestingly enough, the numbers you'll tend to get are between, like I said, 0 and infinity. But if you get below 1, it is recommended that it's a negative correlation. So these things are sort of independent of this one. So these things are frequent, but they're not together most of the time. So if you get 0.8, 0.5, those sort of things, they're kind of not very overlapping.
It's actually even more. They're more likely to not be seen in the same basket.
Yeah. So they.
I'm trying to think of an example of that.
What was the example I gave earlier? If you have toothpaste, you're not going to buy different toothpaste, for example.
Perhaps manual toothbrushes and electric toothbrushes, probably very negatively correlated. I'm trying to think there must be other ones out there.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of a gin and tonic example again. 2 different types of gin. Don't know. There we go. Coke and Pepsi unlikely to appear in the same shopping basket. Probably got a lift of less than 1. Worth finding out.
If it's 1, it's kind of. So the equation says that
Coincidental.
Coincidental. We can't really make a big deal out of this. And if it's more than 1, there is a positive correlation. They are starting to overlap more often, and you're more confident in them both appearing together. And these two metrics can give you an insight into if that rule is valid, and you should kind of go further and research and have a look at what that rule means within your data set.
Just trying to think about support of x and y divided by the support of x times the support of y means that that must equal that for that to be 1, and therefore there would be no correlation.
Yeah.
Okay, so therefore we need our final thing, which is the consequence support. So I'll stick that in here. So our consequence is Lisbon, so that equals that. Now that equals that. And then equals that. Equals Berlin. Equals Berlin. Cool.
Yeah. So we've got 2 supports there, and then we can calculate our lift.
Create some very heavy negatively correlated. Yeah. So we can start to see what's going on here. Look, there was.
You have to change that to 0.5 again, I think.
Yeah, it's going to be horrible. Everything's going to be the same. So boring.
I think what we might do, just before we dive into code, is we're going to use the data set that we've created, and we might have a tiny fiddle with it before, so that we can hopefully...
No, I think we'll just have to go with it. It's a bit of a pain.
We can add and take away
We could.
Amsterdam or one of the specific cities. We will fiddle the data just to make it a little bit more interesting for ourselves.
We could have.
This morning.
I'll just change it now.
Did you delete the one?
Yeah. Well, in real, we can talk about that in a second.
But, you know, kind of
Yeah.
big data for our project, and then you come across something like this.
So the only reason this is a problem now is that I want it to show show you how the equations differ. As they're the same, they're always going to be the same. So in real life, if you get that situation, so I just added 2 Amsterdams.
What you'll find is that you're rarely working on a data set which is this small. So what you're probably unlikely to happen is this sort of outcome. What we've done here is artificially created, 18 transactions by whatever it is, 22 or less cities, and that's just it's kind of not enough data really to make up to use this algorithm. This algorithm is actually we've hand done the a priori algorithm, which we're going to talk about in code in a second. And this algorithm is really good on smaller data sets. It's really efficient on data sets between a couple of thousand rows and maybe tens of thousands of rows. Once you start getting further up, you might want to start looking at more efficient algorithms which compress the data and transpose the data in different ways so that you can parallelize it a little easier. And there are different algorithms to do that, but that's kind of a implementation issue rather than understanding what we're trying to get to, essentially. You'll see in a second that even on our computers, running such a small data set can sometimes be quite slow.
Okay, I've changed the data, so now Amsterdam has a support of 72, which means we've got some slightly different numbers now, which is nice. So, yeah, good spot. There we go. Okay, so now our support's the same for those, but actually our confidence is now different for those. That's because in the Amsterdam situation, it's support of X and Y over the support of X. Support of Amsterdam and Lisbon over the support of Amsterdam, followed by the support of Amsterdam and Lisbon over the support of Lisbon. So immediately you go, right, well, support wasn't telling us everything, because support, they were identical, which means it wasn't taking into account the difference. But now confidence is taking into account the difference. It's saying, well, actually, Lisbon, Amsterdam, I have more confidence in, that being a rule, because it's higher. But the lift, however, has gone back and said, no, the confidence is, the chance of these two things happening is actually the same, and they're below 1, so actually it's negatively correlated.
Yeah. So we have a strong confidence that they are not associated.
Yeah. No, so a strong confidence that they won't appear at the same time.
Same basket,
Yeah.
transaction, whatever. Yeah. So, I mean, this is a really good outcome. Like, a lot of the time you get 1.4, 1.2, some sort of positive, over 1 sort of integer, and the 0 point whatever just means that, like we said, there's a negative correlation, and that's a valid outcome. To usually you go into these things with a hypothesis. Can I see if umbrellas are associated with rain max? Maybe they are negatively associated, and that is a really good outcome because then you can again research and do something about that in the real life.
But or you realise that if something is so negatively correlated, especially for a supermarket shop floor or something like that, put them next to each other. That might be what you do, because you don't. If all the things someone wants are in the same shelf, they'll turn up, go to that shelf, and never go to the rest of the store. So by putting things that they're never going to buy next to each other, you make them walk around the store more. So actually, it's not useless information. It's extremely powerful information, and it's actually probably even harder to spot why you've done it, which is now what Target do, by the way, over that pregnancy thing. Is they throw you random adverts as well, so it doesn't look like they've targeted you too heavily, and they have. So those are our 3 metrics basically, and I can't stress enough the main thing about association rules is it's not complicated. What it's really about is going through those equations and thinking about, if I increase that number, what happens to that? If I increase that number, what happens to that? Just seeing how they all play off each other. Now there are other metrics, there's a leverage and stuff like that, but for the sake of most association rule problems, this is enough. We are going to be using the Python library called M&S.A.007 in a second, but I just want to show you because they've got quite nice documentation, and around it they talk about the kind of metrics that are available. So we're going to be using this in a second, I'll show you. But if you want, what I recommend is called ML, like machine learning, ML extend, extend without an E. And then it's the association rules documentation I'm currently looking at. And they explain sort of the support metric is defined for item sets, not association rules. The table produced, so have a read of it and sort of like slowly think about what it means. It uses some of the notation that Ben's been using. And it's probably worth getting used to what that kind of thing means. So that way up is or. So that's A or C. And this sort of this is logic notation is worth having a look at. But this is quite a nice description of what these things mean. Confidence is the probability of seeing the consequent, C in this case, in a transaction given that it also contains the antecedent. So what is the chance of me seeing C given the fact that I already know they've got A? So I recommend reading this documentation because it helps with these sort of concepts, but it also brings into account leverage and conviction, two more possible metrics. In the case of leverage, it uses subtraction rather than division, so you get an absolute distance rather than a ratio. But it's again, that's probably like further understanding and further really being able to understand what your model's doing. And if you end up using these for proper projects and stuff, these things might help you work out where these rules truly lie. But that is all of the sort of by hand stuff we're going to do. What we're going to do is use the data we've just collected. I've created from that a nice sparse matrix of trues and falses rather than ones and zeros. And that's because Python prefers trues and falses to ones and zeros. But again, this is literally just Excel stuff I've been doing here to get this. So what I'd like you to do is now open our laptops. You can use your own, but if you don't have something installed, we will not be able to concentrate too hard on getting your laptop set up. But do feel free to have a go if you wish. Where's our...
Great. I feel like sometimes this can be kind of scary, but actually this is really nicely written out on Wikipedia, this whole algorithm by hand. And you can actually read through it and have an appreciation for what most of the wording means and marry that up with this crazy notation if you're not familiar with mathematical notation already.
Cool. So if you open the laptops, the first thing you're going to need is this data set that I've just sort of digitized for us. And where can I write that? Find a slide that I can type in. This one. So the data is at decd.co/destination data. So if you go to a new tab and open that, you should see the spreadsheet I've just been working on. Hopefully so. Yeah, if you've got any issues, just do shout and Ben will come round. And once you get to that, I see people sitting. If you go to the tab M&S_sparse, the third tab along, you should see what I'm looking at. And for you guys, if you click File, Download As, comma-separated values, and it will just say Current Sheet. So it actually only pulls down the sheet that you're currently looking at. So make sure you're on this sparse sheet here first, the one with all the trues and falses. Just so you know what you're up to. And then for those of you still, there's the address again if you need it. dec.co/destination-data. So this is going to pull us a CSV document. This is the classic data format, CSV comp separated. You get TSV, you get JSON, you get XML. These are all data types you will come across and see on this 18 months. So I recommend you get used to them. Spreadsheet goes nicely into a CSV. So once you've done that, once you've gone to File, once you've gone to Download As CSV, it will have saved it, hopefully, in your downloads folder. You now need to just click on the Anaconda prompt, which is this one here. And hopefully you've all used Anaconda so far. You've used Jupyter Notebooks. Yeah, cool. So if you just click on that, we can fire up our Jupyter Notebook.
If the internet's being slow, just bear with it. We don't unfortunately have control over the speed of the internet, but if it's connected, it will get there.
Yeah, so yeah, do let me know if I'm going too fast. File, download as, comma separated values. Make sure you're on the sheet, M&S sparse. Save. Yeah, save. When it's finished, that's great. Fine, done. How many people have got that downloaded? Generally. Okay, I'm going to. So Ben will be running around if you need help. For those of you who've got that downloaded, you just click on that Anaconda prompt at the bottom, the black one. And hopefully this will show you C Windows decoded. I strongly recommend you start getting used to using this command prompt. It will be your life. It's faster, more efficient than using a mouse. This is how we can navigate our computer sort of from the keyboard. Once you get used to this, you'll be in here all the time. And if you fight it, it will hurt. So I recommend learning to love your command prompt. Okay, so we've just downloaded the data into our downloads folder. Now, in a standard practice, we would click on the folder, then we'd move the mouse, and we'd open downloads, and then we'd see our destination recommendation M&S path there. But we need to do this for our command prompt. So to change directory or to look at a directory to see what's in it, we can just type dir. When you press enter, that'll show you everything in the current directory, and the current directory is C users decoded. So I can see in here that I'm the decoded user, and I can see I've got a downloads folder. So we need to go inside that downloads folder because that's where our CSV file is. So we can do cd, which stands for change directory, and then we can type downloads. But look, it's case sensitive, so it's a capital D. But once you do DOW with a capital D, or at least DOW, if you were then to hit tab, it will auto-complete the rest of the word for you because it's the only folder in that directory that has DOW to start with. So there's your first shortcut, and now you can see that we're in decoded downloads. If you do dir again, stands for directory, you can see the contents of the directory you're in, and you can see destination recommendations M&S.sparse.csv. So we're currently in the same place as the data that we just downloaded, which means that we're gonna do our Python work from here. It will be easy to import the data. So to start a Jupyter Notebook, does anyone know what you type? Yeah, Jupyter with a Y, space notebook. Jupyter has a Y, not because someone was funny, because Jupyter Notebooks can be used for the programming languages Julia, Python, and R. Jupyter. Press enter, and if you give that a second, it should fire up. Yeah, any issues, let Ben know. And if all went to plan, you should see something like this. How are people doing? Nod at the back there. Nod at the front there. Cool, okay, generally, yeah. Generally everyone's in the same place. Okay, I've got a spinner for some reason, which is always worrying. Okay, so you can see our data is there. That's very handy. We're going to do our work next to this CSV file. So we need a new notebook. So to do that, just click New. Choose Notebook Python 3. Make sure it is Python 3 and not Python 2 in the future. You want to be working with newer versions, not older versions of languages. So let's choose that, and that will open a new notebook. Give it a better name. Do ASOC M&S or something, whatever you want to call it. Just click on where it says untitled. It will allow you to rename it. Get used to the sort of disciplines of good file organization. I can assure you there'll be a 1 in the morning session at some point, and you'll have something called Untitled 4, and you'll wonder what's going on, and you'll wish you hadn't left yourself in that situation. Been there. Okay, right. So does anyone remember how you can look at a spreadsheet in Python? Sorry? Import pandas, thank you, yeah. So the sort of mature way to think of spreadsheets now is call them data frames. And pandas is the way we can look at a spreadsheet or data frame within Python. So we're going to import pandas. I'll just go a bit bigger. Let me just zoom in for you. Maybe one more. There we go. Import pandas. But we're lazy because we're efficient. Those are the same thing in this industry, by the way, which is quite nice. Import pandas as PD. Because we don't want to have to type pandas out every time. It takes 2.5 times longer than it would to type PD. From now on, whenever we want to use pandas, we can just refer to PD, which is nice. Let's just run that and make sure it works. To run that, hold down Shift and press Enter. And you'll see the star over here. This tells you that cell is running until it becomes a number. Number 1 in this case, and now I know that's the first cell that I ran. And it's moved me into the next one down. Now, it tends to be good practice to do all your imports right at the top here when you're generally writing Python code, just so people know what's coming. However, just today, we're going to do it in the order that we need it, so we can discuss it bit by bit. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to have a look at our data, make sure it's exactly what we expect. We're looking for a matrix of trues and falses. That's how Panda can deal with this. So let's create a data frame. The convention is to call a generic data frame, a data frame that you haven't done anything specific to, df, data frame. You'll see it as you follow tutorials around the internet. So I'm going to try and follow their convention so you're sort of familiar with it. At this point, we could type pandas.read and press tab. Is it going to do it for me? Come on, tab. It's always very slow, this. Well, that was what I was going to try and show you, because you can use pandas there. But, okay, yeah, try that. If you hit tab, just do a couple of that, just do a RE. It might speed up. There we go. You get all the possible file types. We want a CSV because that was the kind of data we downloaded, so that's quite handy. We can click on that. By the end of this, you will have used the majority of those. Just so you know, in 8 years, I've never used a GBQ file, whatever it is. But we do know that if we ever come across one, pandas can read it. So read CSV, some brackets, and then some speech marks. Now we need to tell it where our file is. So what I can do is I can have a quick look. Our file was called destination recommendation space M&S_sparse with a capital S.csv. Quite a lot to type in. So actually what we can do is we can just do, no, destination DE, capital D, remember, and then hit tab, and it will show you all the possible things it knows of that start with DE. And the first is meaningless to us, the third is meaningless to us. And that middle one's our data set. Instead of me typing it all out, I can just click on it, and it will fill it in for me. And then just to make sure it's exactly what we expect, we'll have a look at the head of it. By default, to the top 5 rows. And we can do Shift and Enter. And you should see our matrix. Okay. So just to show you, if you wonder, I wasn't born with these commands in my head. I pulled it all off the ML extend documentation. It's all here. So this is what we're going to use. In fact, we already it's already showing us what we need to import there, because the general library or the general algorithm we're going to be using is called a priori. I don't know if anyone speaks Latin fluently here, but I understand that to mean from logic I have concluded. So that's why it's called that for some reason. So the library is called ML_extend, but ML_extend has lots of different things it can do. One of the things it can do is discover frequently occurring patterns within data, and there's a library within that to do that. The algorithms within that is called a priori. So that's what we're going to need. Our data frame's looking good. So in the next cell down, let's import our libraries that will give us that from ML extend. We want, you can think of this as like you've got a library called ML extend. Within that, you've got a library called frequent patterns. There are lots of ways of finding frequently occurring patterns, and the one we're going to use is called a priori. But that's literally just our lifts and confidences and all that stuff. We actually want to create rules from it. So from the same library then, from ML extend dot frequent patterns, and specifically we want to create association rules. We could go and look at the documentation and see what other types of rules we could create. So those are the libraries. That's going to do the stuff that we just did manually. So run that. Ooh. Thank you. Okay, done. Cool. So let's create now a list of the frequently occurring items, and using that support. Oh, it's gone. Using that support property as our way of deciding what is a frequent item, and it kind of makes sense. How many different transactions does an item appear in? Will give us some sort of frequency. So frec items. I made that up, by the way. You can call it anything you like. So it's coming from the a priori library. The data we want to do this on is our df. And before we set a minimum support of like 35% or something, and that was purely to chop it down because I didn't want to sit in Excel typing all the possible combinations out. But actually here we're exploring our data, right? So we don't want to cut anything out, especially if the computer's going to do the hard labor for us. So we can say that the minimum support we're interested in is very, very, very low. In other words, include everything except 0 support. So to do that, I'm just going to go 0 point and 6 zeros, then a 1. Just really, really small support. And there's this flag. Use col names. We want to set that to true. Otherwise, it won't use Amsterdam and Lisbon and Berlin. It will use a number, which is much harder to associate as a human. And let's have a look at them. Let's see what support values we got back. They're probably going to differ from my other ones because I fiddled with them, remember? So we want to sort them, and we want to sort by the support column. Hang on, let me just show you what we've actually got there. You can do this as well if you want. You can just run that at this stage. So this is what it looks like. This is what you just created. So a priori has literally just gone through all of our transactions, and it's created a support value for each of them. They're not in any order at this point. So I'm just going to sort it by support and set ascending to false, i.e. we want them to get smaller as they get further away, so the top ones are the ones with the highest support. And now if you run that, by the way, if these numbers differ from the other ones, it's probably because I fiddled around with them. It does absolutely everything. Yeah. So that's a good spot. If you have a look, the support for Lisbon and Barcelona is higher than the support for Madrid on its own. So Lisbon and Barcelona is a pairing that occurs more than just Madrid on its own. It's like, so it's done all of them for us. Okay, so if we scroll past all that, Sure. So the next thing we're going to want to do is start creating some rules, and that's where we start using metrics like confidence and lift, etc., etc. This is purely a probability of the pair of something appearing. So I'm just going to scroll past that. Hopefully everyone's got it. So let's create some rules, and let's call it rules. It kind of makes sense. This is coming from that other library we imported. Forgotten what it's called, sorry. Freq items. Yeah. So from association rules, if you have a look, if you do shift and tab inside of her brackets like this, it will actually show you what this function is requiring. And the first thing it's expecting is the data frame. So that tells me a couple of things. That tells me this library is basically tied in some way to pandas. So I suspect what these rules will be when I get it back is a data frame, which is quite nice. All of pandas power will be on that. What metric we want to use, what threshold we want to use, etc., etc. These values, when it says like metric equals that and min threshold equals that, they're default values. If I don't put them, that's the value I'll get. If I set them myself, I can change them. So it says that the metric is going to be confidence. Let's just put the metric in anyway. We need df because that's the name of our data frame. Sorry, it's not. Whoa. Freq items is the name of our data frame. Because we want to apply the association rules to the frequent items data we've already seen. And I'm just going to set the metric manually. But as you saw, hopefully, it is confidence is the default. And their minimum threshold for confidence is 80%. That's quite a high confidence. You might get that in a supermarket scenario with tens of thousands of transactions. We certainly won't be getting 80%, or at least I don't think we'll be getting 80% confidence on 17 results that were sort of randomly selected by us. So let's set the min threshold to 30% maybe. I'll just leave that there for a second. And then I just on the next line wrote rules.head just so we can see what rules it came up with. Notice it's taking a while to run, and that was only with 17 shopping baskets or equivalent of. Imagine you had a data set with 10,000 shopping baskets in. That's why we set minimum supports and minimum threshold values, because the less data we give it, the less time it will take. I've had these take 45 minutes to run before. I've had them crash my computer before. So you don't want to, we've set our threshold on support earlier to 0.000001, basically meaning all the data was what was going to be left. But that could take ages to crunch on bigger data sets. So you want to be fiddling with that number. You want to go, you need to be thinking ahead, otherwise you'll end up waiting at your computer for days before it comes up with anything. Okay, let's see what it came up with. So it said that given Barcelona, someone choosing Amsterdam, supports 12, confidence 37, lift is 85%. So that's below 1, or 0.85, below 1. A negative correlation there. And our leverage is negative there. Interesting. We didn't talk about leverage, but you can start to see the negative is suggesting that it's negatively correlated. So what other ones have we got? We've got, what did we support? So we've got, we haven't sorted yet, which is interesting. So we've got support, this other one here, however, where's my lift gone? 1.81. So actually this is saying Amsterdam and Budapest, which got cut out of ours because we put our threshold so high. It's saying if you choose if you've already chosen Amsterdam, you're very likely to choose Budapest, has a lift of 1.81. High correlation. So let's sort our rules. by size. We want to sort according to support. Why would we sort by support? Think about what support tells us. So let's have a look. If we're sorting by support, we want the largest support at the top. That means this number is big. That means relative to this number is big. That means that what we're doing is sorting by the ones that appear in most transactions. And then when we bring in a second one, i.e. this and this, we're saying actually what we want to do is sort by support that has a lot of them both appearing out of relative to the amount of possible transactions. So keep thinking back to what that actually means. So sort this by support. Okay, so the highest support is Edinburgh, Berlin. And there we go. See, by cutting it out when we did it manually, we cut out a lot of actually interesting stuff. It doesn't really matter because we were doing it by hand and no one ever does that. But actually, just by cutting it out, we never saw the rule Edinburgh and Berlin actually has quite a high support. Almost a quarter of all transactions have both of those in. And when they do appear, 1.87 lift, suggesting that actually there's positive correlation here. If you are likely to see Berlin if Edinburgh is already there. And interestingly, that's actually a great example. Edinburgh, Berlin has a lift of 1.875. Berlin, Edinburgh has a lift of 1.875. So the correlation is the same. It doesn't matter which way around you choose them. But the confidence didn't suggest that. The confidence suggested that if you choose Berlin first rather than Edinburgh, it's less confident that there's actually going to be any correlation. So between the three of these factors, we've actually got quite a nice image of what's going on here. We can start to think a bit more about it. You could sort by something else, by the way. You could sort by lift to find out which one has the highest lift. Let me just try that. So there's something with a lift of... Can't even see it anymore. I need to zoom out, guys. Sorry. So lift is 25 with a confidence of 100% confidence. Hugely correlated when you've already chosen St. Petersburg, Berlin, Barcelona, and Copenhagen. 100% of the time, according to your data, we're going to also choose Paris, Lisbon, Milan, and Dublin. In that situation, really, really correlated. 100% of the time that will occur, but 0.04 lift. Very tiny. There's probably only one record in there that actually shows that correlation. So when you start this out, you can think, support is useless. I need confidence. Confidence is useless because it doesn't tell me about the direction, so I need to lift. But actually, you can see how you need to also go backwards. You're dancing between these three numbers, and what's really important is being able to understand the domain that you're thinking about. If we're selling, if this is buying a Bentley and you're very likely to buy a helicopter, this might have only occurred once, but that could be something that the sales team really, really want to know about. If you buy a helicopter, you ask for a Bentley to go with it or something like that. That could be great. So we need to understand it. But when we're talking about Ryanair flights, one record where you've bought chosen all of these, so you're going to choose all of these, probably not telling us much at all.
The conviction is infinity as well.
Yeah. It tells you something about how often. So how do you get an infinity, by the way, mathematically? So if I make this number huge on the bottom, what happens to this number? It's very small. So if I make this infinite, then this number goes to 0 in effect. But if this number is going to infinity, what happens to this? 0, yeah. So the only way you can ever get an infinity out is if something on the bottom of a division is basically 0, very, very close to 0. So when you see this infinity here, hopefully you can see that INF there. That means somewhere something has gone to 0. I can't even tell you off by heart what the conviction equation is, but I know that how to get an infinity is divide something by 0. So immediately I decided to go, there's something odd here, I need to have a better look. So let's put it back to support. So you get something a bit more interesting. So imagine we wanted to pick something out here. Just going to finish up with one last thing, just so you could see how you might sort of play around with this a bit more. Let's just set ourselves some rules. If you make a comment, let's just try at least 2 antecedents. So 2 things in our original antecedent. So this and this happened, therefore we think something else is going to happen. Imagine we wanted to pick this out. Let's just say we wanted a confidence over 0.25. Again, I made that number up. You can choose whatever you want. And a lift greater than 1.0. So let's just try this. So what we can do is our rules table, the one above, we can say rules, and let's create a new column. Let's call it len, antecedent length. So we want to find ones that are more than 1, basically, at least 2, we said. It's going to be equal to our rules, antecedent column, antecedents, it's called antecedents. And what we want to do, and this will become more familiar as you sort of become more comfortable with Python, but basically what we want to do is ask it to return, this is called a lambda function, you'll come across them, but we want to return how many antecedents are in that column. So our rules ant length column, which doesn't exist yet, which we're about to create. So when you run what I've just written there, you should see a new column called ant len, and that'll just contain how many antecedents were in that column. This is called a lambda function, and it's basically, it will go through every single entry in the antecedent column and count how many things are in there. We're just for this question, I've just said, I want to know the rules when there's more than 2 antecedents, there's confidence is over 25%, lift is greater than 1. The first thing I need to do is know whether or not there's more than 2 antecedents. That's going to be stored in our rules column. If you run that, you should hopefully see that that's added this new column over here, ant len, and that's based on how many are in this column here. That's all we've done is count those up. Yeah. LAMBDA. Yeah. Is that right? So confidence 25%, lift and 1, and we want more than 2 in our antecedents. So let's try it. So from our rules, we want to know when our new column ant len is greater than or equal to 2. That was what we said. I'm going to spread this out so you can read it a bit better. So what we're doing here is we're doing pandas queries. So I can actually ask the data frame to only return me rules that meet certain requirements. So the first thing I'm saying is, for my rules, find me all the entries where the ant len column is greater than or equal to 2. And, ampersand for and, where the rules, what did we say we wanted? We wanted confidence greater than 25%. Confidence is greater than, should we say greater than or equal to 0.25, 25%. And the final thing we said was when the rules lift column, the rule was over 1, so we want positive correlation. I hope something comes back. is greater than or equal to 1.0. Oh, no, greater than 1.0. I won't. I don't know if that's going to return anything, by the way, because I've made those numbers up. So if it doesn't work, change the confidence and the lift requirements we stuck in. But all we're doing there is just showing you how you can filter these things down based on certain rule conditions. Has anyone run that? Syntax error. I'll run it to make sure I don't get one. I don't get one. So I've tried to space it out so it's a bit easier to read. I know what I can do to make your life easier. Is that easier? Hopefully that's easier. Did it run for anyone else? Did it give you back a rule? Some rules, hopefully. Cool.
So where there's quite a few where the conviction is infinity, does that mean that there's maybe an error? Or
It doesn't mean there's an error necessarily. We'd have to go and look at the conviction equation. How's everyone getting on with that, by the way? Has people still got syntax errors? All good? So for instance, just as an example, if you have a look at that very first entry, is it, if they've chosen Amsterdam and Barcelona, they're going to choose Budapest? Have we all got that as our first one? So that's interesting. So if I scroll down, do I end up with the same thing? What was the pairing? Yeah, so this one here. So it's because we're sorting by support, and the support's the same in all three cases. Yeah. But what's interesting there is we've got a 0.08 support, which is a very, very, very small support. So in terms of that conviction, if you're getting an infinity conviction, because I'm zoomed in, it's hard for me to see. But have a look. Maybe your conviction is infinity when your support is tiny. So hopefully, we haven't even looked at the conviction equation today, but hopefully you can start to see that seems to be some sort of thing. If support's very low, conviction's off the scale.
Yeah.
Sorry? Is that what it is?
Yeah. I think.
Yeah, there you go, that's it.
Yeah, I think what you're saying here is it's basically this happens all the time. So the conviction of this is like all the time.
doesn't mean that it's just happened once? We've
Well,
only got one entry where that
Exactly. In our data, we've only got one or two entries, and it always happens for those two entries.
You don't. It doesn't have to remember it. It doesn't. Confidence can be 100% if in every case those pairings exist. So you can still have a high confidence, but in this case, the support is saying there's not many entries here. The confidence is saying every time it occurs, this happens.
Yeah.
So that doesn't mean it's only once. That's probably only once, not that one. You see what I mean?
But this comes back to what we were saying at the beginning. This kind of exploration of the data, we have to start kind of understanding the maths and understanding kind of what we're trying to look for in these equations. What's interesting about these numbers is it that some of these things always happen? Can we look further into that, or is it that there are lots of bread and they have a correlation between butter and milk or something like that, or there are higher value items which happen few of the time, but they always happen with something else. So you might buy a car, but you're never going to buy lots of cars. But if you buy a car, you might also buy
The power steering add-on.
yeah, exactly, power steering add-on, whatever else goes in cars.
Yeah.
I've never bought new cars. So I don't really know what you buy.
So if I just clear this, just to show you, apart from that last two blocks, up until there, that is all the code to do association rules on any data set you have that is a sparse matrix. So if you can create it one observation per row, sparse matrix, trues and falses everywhere, that's what you have to write. And actually, the only thing you need to change is the file name there. So that's why most of today was spent thinking about that, because that's how you can work out whether or not the rule, if you understand that, you you can understand the meaningfulness of a rule. If you understand that, doesn't mean you know anything about if that rule's important, irrelevant, etc., etc. It's really understanding how these numbers, when you divide one by the other, how they relate to each other, that helps you understand whether or not your rule is meaningful or not. This bit down here was just us messing around with the results. There's not a lot of code there, and actually that's why doing this stuff by hand, going away, having a cup of tea, sitting there with those 3 or 4 equations and going, if I increase the number on the bottom, what happens to the value? Therefore, what does that mean? That's what I would recommend trying to do in this module. The main reason is there aren't a lot of these algorithms where you can solve the whole problem by hand and truly see the equations and how they affect the results. This is one of the ones that you can do it, and it can really, really help cement the basis for all the other kind of stuff you'll be doing. So I can't remember the conviction equation, but I know how you create an infinity. So what does that mean? So that's the kind of thing you try and get your head around. Sort of, it's almost like taking the magic away if you can understand that and really understanding what's going on under the hood. So congratulations, everyone. Where's my? You can see how. Yeah, congratulations, everyone. Hopefully that wasn't too painful for Monday afternoon. Hopefully divisions now are a whole new light in your life. Ratios are so powerful. Actually use them for something. However, I wouldn't forget this. Going away, doing some stuff on something without understanding domain knowledge will mean that you'll just end up with a bunch of rules and not be able to decide whether they're actually meaningful or not. So I think that's kind of a really important lesson from this foundation module. You can't separate yourself away from what these rules actually mean, especially when you start to think about more expensive items, more luxury items, items bought less frequently, etc., etc., etc. So we have. So I like to do this all in one. So let's do it like this. It would be great, please, if you could fill out the feedback form. That would be really handy. Please don't leave if you haven't filled in the registration form. Otherwise, everyone gets in trouble. And if you have any questions about this or anything, shoot.
Yeah. So at this point, once you've filled in the feedback form, you're free to go. Thanks very much. We're going to stick around for a little bit.
That's an I.
That's an I, 2 I, capital I?
Yeah.
Capital I. We're going to stick around for a little bit. We're going to be here packing up and stuff, so ask us any questions that you want. Thank you very much, and good luck with the rest of this sprint.
Is there a way, what we've done today, is there a way that I can get it sent?
So you can email it to yourself now if you like, or you can take a photo of it. Or I don't know. Your code itself won't appear in the GitHub, but the walkthrough is in the GitHub for this module.
And as Alex showed you, there is the ML Extend website. Pretty much has verbatim
Yeah.
what we did in code today as well.
Yeah, if I was you, I'd be looking more at the online documentation.
Does anyone want to take one of these away with them? I could sign it if you like. No?
Ben's got it tattooed on his back.
I know. I can't see it though,
No.
so I always forget.
Plus, oh, sorry.
The link.